Hello and welcome to Basics for Gamers presents The Basics of Runes Part 2. In the previous video, we discussed the foundation for runes in Pathfinder, primarily the relationship between fundamental runes and property runes. And in this video, we're going to expand on that by covering a few of the other additional rules, including how to etch or create a magic rune, how to upgrade runes, and how to transfer runes from one item to another. This video does rely heavily on the crafting rules, so if you've not already viewed our videos on crafting, it's highly recommended that you do so before continuing here. Links to those videos are provided in the description. The term etching a rune is just a formal way of saying creating a rune and adding it to an item. This follows the same system as crafting anything else. The only real difference is you're not making an entirely new item, you're just adding to an already existing item. So if you want to etch a +1 potency rune to a longsword, you would first need to be at least expert proficiency in the crafting skill and have the magical crafting feat. You also need the longsword you plan to etch the rune on. You need to have a formula for +1 weapon potency runes, and you would need to have half of the rune's price available in raw materials. In this case, it would be half of 35 gold, which is 17 gold and 5 silver. From there, you spend 4 days of work, as usual with crafting, and after that you make a skill check, and if successful, you can pay the balance to finish the project or invest more time in lowering the balance. Again, check out our videos about crafting for more details on how all of that works. Some runes, typically fundamental runes, allow you to upgrade lower level versions into higher level versions. If a rune is eligible to be upgraded, it will say so in its description. Here the description for armor potency runes spells it out for you. The process is simple. It works just like etching a rune, except the price is discounted by the price of the existing rune that is being replaced. So if you wanted to upgrade a suit of +1 chainmail to +2 chainmail, you would treat it the same as crafting a +2 armor potency rune from scratch. You need a formula for +2 armor potency runes. You must be at least 11th level and have master proficiency in crafting. You need the craft magical items feat, and you must provide 50% of the rune's price upfront in raw materials. The difference with upgrading, though, is the normal price for this rune is 1,060 gold, but when upgrading, you discount it by the original rune's price of 160 gold, making the upgrade price 900 gold pieces. You pay 50% of that upfront, or 450 gold, spend 4 days of downtime working, and then make a crafting skill check as usual. Then, assuming you succeed the check, you can either pay off the remaining balance of 450 gold, or spend more days of downtime, lowering that balance further. You can also use the crafting skill to move a rune from one item to another, or swap a rune on one item with a rune that's on another item. Doing so takes 1 day of downtime and costs 10% of the rune's price. If you're swapping runes between 2 items, then you only use the price of the highest level rune to determine the cost. You don't have to pay 10% of the price of each of the runes being swapped, only the higher level one. Aside from being 1 day instead of 4, this is otherwise identical to crafting or etching a rune. You pay half the cost, which is 5% of the rune's price up front, make your crafting check, and can choose to pay the other half or continue working as normal with crafting. There are a couple additional rules to be aware of. First, if swapping runes, they must both be fundamental runes or both must be property runes. And the final item or items must be legal. For example, you can't transfer a wounding rune from a dagger onto a mace because this rune requires it to be attached to slashing or piercing weapons and maces or bludgeoning weapons. One tweak to be aware of is when transferring potency runes. It's possible you might end up with an item that has property runes on it that can no longer function because they require a potency rune that's no longer present. This doesn't prevent you from transferring the potency rune, but affected property runes go dormant until they're either transferred to an item that does have the necessary potency rune, or until you etch the appropriate potency rune onto the item that is bearing those dormant runes, at which time they reactivate and can function again. I also want to mention runestones. Runestones cost 3 gold pieces each, and they essentially provide a way of transporting a rune without requiring it to be etched onto a weapon or a suit of armor. These are a great way for GMs to distribute runes to players so that those players can decide how best to use the runes, rather than giving them runes already etched to equipment that they may not want to use or may not even be able to use. Runestones work like any other item for the purposes of crafting or transferring a rune. You can etch a rune onto a runestone, or you can transfer a rune off of an item and onto a runestone. The big difference is that runestones are consumed and destroyed as soon as its rune is removed off of it and transferred to another item, and that transfer has no cost associated with it. Under normal circumstances, when you transfer a rune off of an item, you have to pay 10% of its price. If that item is a runestone, there is no cost associated with transferring it from that runestone and onto another item. In this video, we discussed the rules for etching, upgrading, and transferring runes. The process of creating a rune and applying it to a weapon or armor is called etching. The mechanics for etching a rune are identical to the rules for crafting any other magic item, except that the rune must be applied to another already existing item, such as a weapon, suit of armor, or a runestone. Some runes, especially fundamental runes, can be upgraded from lower level versions to higher level versions. This process is the same as etching a rune, except the price of the new rune is discounted by the price of the older rune that is being upgraded. Runes can also be transferred from one item to another, or 2 runes from different items may be swapped at the same time. When transferring runes, all items must be legal after the transfer. For example, a rune that requires a melee weapon may not be transferred onto a ranged weapon. And if after the transfer some property runes are no longer valid with their new potency rune, those property runes go dormant until they are either transferred to a new item or the required potency rune is etched onto the affected item, at which time they reactivate and can function as normal. Transferring runes requires 1 day of downtime to work and costs 10% of the rune's price. If swapping 2 runes, the cost is 10% of the higher level rune's price only. Otherwise, this works in a similar fashion to normal crafting. After the day of work, you make a crafting skill check and may pay the remaining balance of the project or spend another day working to lower that balance as usual. Before we close, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons. These videos would not be possible without their continued generosity and support. Members of the Basics for Gamers Patreon community receive special benefits, like getting to vote on the topics that we cover in the future, and also they get to see these videos 1 week and ad-free before everybody else. Visit the link shown on the left of the screen and in the description if you'd like to know more about becoming a patron. If you would like to support this channel and help it grow, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you get notified when new videos release. And we can always be reached through our Twitter and Facebook pages too. Thanks for watching, take care, and we will see you soon with more Basics of Pathfinder.